I gave 21 years to this marriage. I gave it my whole back, both hands, and most of my better years. So when my wife walked through the front door at 12:40 in the morning, heels hanging from 2 fingers, hair twisted up in a style she hadn't worn since we were dating, and looked at me sitting in my own living room, like I was, somehow the problem. Something inside me went very quiet. My name is Knox Merritt. I'm 52 years old, and for the last 18 of those years I've been building Merritt Outdoor Living from a one-truck operation into the kind of company that does full hardscape design and installation across 3 counties in Central Oregon. Stone patios, retaining walls, custom fire pits, outdoor kitchens built to last 30 years in the rain. Work you can stand on. That's always been my measure of a good job, if it holds weight. I thought my marriage was the same kind of thing. The night everything changed, I was supposed to be in Boise for a regional contractors summit. I'd been looking forward to it. 2 days of trade talk, equipment demos, dinner with suppliers. I only saw twice a year. But the venue had a water main failure Tuesday morning, and by noon they'd pushed the whole event back a week. I didn't bother texting my wife. I figured I'd just drive home, maybe pick up Thai food. Make it a quiet evening. She liked surprises. Or she used to. Her car wasn't in the driveway when I pulled up at 6:30. I checked my phone. Nothing. I assumed she was showing a late listing. She'd been doing a lot of evening showings lately, said the market was picking up, said buyers wanted to see properties after work. I didn't question it. My wife had been a real estate agent for 11 years, and she knew her business better than anyone. I made a sandwich and watched some baseball and waited. By 9 o'clock, the driveway was still empty. I texted. By 10 I called. Straight to voicemail, the way a phone goes when it's powered off or actively ignored. I told myself there were a dozen reasonable explanations. I almost believed myself. By 11:30, I'd pulled up the brokerage's website. No open houses listed for the evening. Nothing on the calendar she shared with me. I sat in the living room with the lamp switched off and my hands flat on my knees, and I waited, and I thought about how long it had been since I'd had any real reason to pay attention to where she was going. The headlights swept across the ceiling. At 12:38, I heard her car door. Then a long pause. Long enough that I understood she was sitting out there getting herself ready. I didn't move. I didn't turn on the lamp. She came through the door a little loose, not drunk, just relaxed in the way people are when they're certain no one's watching. Her hair was pinned up with one of those clips she used to wear when we first met, before she told me she'd outgrown that look. Her blouse was untucked at one side. Near the hem of her sleeve was a faint smear, the wrong shade of lipstick, a color she hadn't been wearing that morning. She hummed something under her breath, dropped her heels by the door without touching the wall for balance, which takes a particular kind of practiced ease. When she hit the light switch and found me sitting there, she didn't scream. She didn't even gasp. She pulled in a short breath, and her face went carefully, deliberately neutral. Knox. Her hand went to her throat. You scared me. You're supposed to be in Boise. Summit got canceled, I said. Water main. You could have called. Where have you been? She moved further into the room. Not toward me, just to a different position, the way someone shifts when they're thinking about angles. Drinks with Patsy after the Kelling Road showing. My phone died. The lie was smooth. That was what caught me, not the lie itself, because something in my chest had already known around 10 o'clock. But how smooth it was. Rehearsed for a different occasion, and repurposed because it fit well enough. Call Patsy, I said. My wife tilted her head. It's 1 in the morning. If you were just getting drinks, she's probably still awake. The silence between us stretched until it had weight. I'm not going to stand here and be interrogated, she said, and now something harder moved underneath her voice. The tone she used when she felt control slipping and needed to reframe the conversation fast. You want to talk about me coming home late? Fine. Let's also talk about how many evenings I sat in this house while you were out at job sites. Until 8, 9 o'clock. Let's have that conversation too. I'm asking where you were. And I told you. Maybe trust me for once. I stood up slowly. I wasn't angry yet. I was mostly just watching her, trying to reconcile the person in front of me with the one I'd thought I'd known. Your blouse is on inside out, Dina. She looked down. Her jaw went tight. Who is he? For a long moment, she said nothing. Then something behind her eyes shifted, not into guilt, but into calculation, like she was deciding how much to release. She crossed her arms and lifted her chin and said, "His name is Asher. He's a mortgage broker the office partners with, and I know how that sounds, so don't." How long? 4 months. I let that sit. He makes me feel seen. Her voice went soft in a way I don't think she intended. You're buried in this business, Knox. You talk about your projects the way some men talk about their children. I've been invisible in this house for years. So instead of telling me that, I tried telling you. Her voice rose. 3 years ago. 2 years ago. Every year. You'd nod and say you understood, and then nothing changed. I've thought about that since. I'll be honest with you. There's probably truth in it. I was distracted. I worked too much. I forgot how to ask how she was doing, and actually wait for the real answer. That's my part in it, and I own it. But it doesn't change what she did with it. I'm moving to the guest room, I said. She blinked. Just like that? You've been gone 4 months. I'm just catching up. I didn't sleep. I sat in my truck in the driveway until close to 4 in the morning, turning things over. My wife had been different since sometime last winter, better dressed, more distracted, phone face down on the counter, coming home with a restless kind of energy that didn't match a busy showing week. I'd seen it. I'd explained it away, every single time. By the time the sky went gray, I knew what I needed to do. I've known Holbrook for 20 years. We've fished the same stretch of river since our 30s, and he happens to practice family law. I called him before 7 and asked if we could meet. He didn't ask a lot of questions, just said to come in at 9. His advice, over bad diner coffee, was blunt. Document everything. Don't leave the house. Protect the business. And get a clear financial picture before she did. Merritt Outdoor Living was mine before we married. I'd built it 6 years before our wedding with a $40,000 personal loan and a used skid steer I'd bought from a retiring contractor in Medford. We'd signed a prenuptial agreement. Her parents had insisted on it, actually, back when they weren't sure I was a safe bet. A tradesman with ambition and no track record. That document had been sitting in a file cabinet in my garage workshop for 21 years. I hadn't thought about it in a decade. I was thinking about it now. When I came downstairs that morning, my wife was at the kitchen island, with her coffee and her laptop, dressed for work. She looked up when I came in, and there was a moment where we both just registered the new shape of the room. "I'd like to try counseling," she said, "before anything permanent." "Is Asher still in the picture?" A pause. I asked him for space. "That's not what I asked you." She closed the laptop. "I haven't formally ended it, but I want to try and—" "Dina." I poured coffee and set the pot down carefully. "I'm filing for divorce. You'll want to get an attorney." She stared at me. Whatever she'd expected. Anger, a scene, begging, maybe all three. This wasn't it. "You're not going to fight for us?" "I don't fight for things that aren't mine anymore." The weeks that followed had their own miserable rhythm. We moved around each other in that house, like two people sharing an office. Careful, polite, giving wide berth. She spent more time at work. I spent more time at job sites. Holbrook worked on the filing. I pulled together financial records I hadn't looked at in years. About 3 weeks in, a woman called my cell from an unknown number. "Is this Knox Merritt?" Her voice was careful, the way people sound when they're doing something that makes them nervous. "Speaking. My name is Odette. I work at Pacific Shore Realty with your wife. I think you need to hear some things." We met at a coffee shop 2 towns east. Odette was younger than I'd expected, late 20s, still in her first year at the brokerage. She sat across from me with both hands around her mug and said she'd almost turned the car around 3 times on the drive over. "I'm not trying to get into your personal business," she said, "but what I know isn't right, and I can't just let it go." "Go ahead." Asher Dole. That's his full name. He has a history at several brokerages in the valley. She kept her voice low, careful. He finds agents in difficult marriages, gets close, and then helps them structure income and delay closings in ways that minimize what shows up in a divorce settlement. He did it to someone at my last office. Her husband lost a significant amount. She set her phone on the table and slid it toward me. She'd photographed 3 screenshots, text messages between my wife and Asher. In them, he referred to my business as the prize. He laid out a plan. Challenged the prenup by claiming I'd used marital income to sustain the company. Meanwhile, route her commission income to a holding account in her name. Only one I'd have no visibility into. Let the numbers shift for a few months before the filing. My wife had responded with a laughing emoji, and he won't even know where to look. Odette took the phone back. I thought you deserved to know. I thanked her, and meant it completely. On the drive home, I called Holbrook and told him to bring in a forensic accountant. What they found took about 10 days. Over the previous 4 months, nearly $60,000 in commission income had been quietly moved into an account I'd had no knowledge of. 2 pending closings had been structured to delay disbursement past our expected filing date. There was a preliminary draft, barely started, mostly notes, that appeared to be the foundation of a claim that Merritt Outdoor Living had been sustained by marital income for the past decade. None of it was true. Every loan I'd ever taken was in my name alone, predating our marriage, or drawn from business accounts I'd kept separate throughout. The prenup was explicit on all of it, but the intent was clear enough. My wife came home one evening to find me at the dining room table, with files spread out and a cup of coffee I'd let go cold. She stood in the doorway reading the scene. "Getting organized," she said. "Holbrook files this week. Wanted everything in order." She sat down across from me, not beside me, across. "Knox, I think we moved too fast on this. I think we should." "Did Asher move on?" She went very still. "Someone else at the office, maybe. Or another firm." Her jaw tightened. "That's a cruel thing to say." "I'm not being cruel. I think that's what happened. And I'd like to know if I'm right." She said nothing for a long moment. Then, "He said things had gotten too complicated." I nodded once. "I'd also like to talk about the holding account." The color left her face in a way that was almost visible, like a tide pulling back. "And the commission structure on the Highland property. And the draft claim against the business." She stood up. "I don't know what you think you've found. I know exactly what I found." I kept my voice even. "And so does Holbrook, and so does the accountant. Now we can handle this the hard way, which opens up conversations outside of family court. Or we can settle it clean." I paused. "You keep the house, fair cash settlement. I keep the business, and everything attached to it, which you always knew was mine before you married me. The holding account gets dissolved, the funds returned, and we both walk away with some dignity." She stood there a long time. "You've changed," she said finally. "You pushed me to." "I meant that as a compliment, Knox." "I know you did." Her attorney came in ready for a fight, a sharp woman out of Portland, with a reputation for creative prenup challenges. She left 2 hours later, with significantly adjusted expectations. Holbrook told me afterward. The evidence was too clean. The prenup too solid. The paper trail on the hidden account too clear to reframe. They accepted the terms with one modification. My wife wanted 6 months of health insurance continuation. I said yes without hesitation. There was no reason not to give her that. The morning after we signed, I drove out to a job site on the east side of town, a full backyard redesign that a retired couple had been waiting 6 months to start. I stood at the edge of the unfinished patio and looked at the stonework my crew had laid the previous week and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A kind of clarity, the way the air feels after a long rain. I hired Odette 2 months later. She'd put in her resignation at the brokerage shortly after everything came out. Said she didn't feel right staying. I needed someone to handle client communications and project intake. And I needed someone I knew was honest under pressure. She turned out to be better at the job than I'd even hoped. The business grew. We brought on 2 new crew leads, expanded into the next county, Started doing design consultations that attracted a higher tier of client. Larger scopes, more ambitious builds. I was busier than I'd been in years. But it was a different kind of busy. Momentum instead of avoidance. I heard about my wife through mutual friends the way you do in a town that's not quite large enough to make anyone disappear. She'd moved to a smaller independent firm. Asher had no contact with her, as far as anyone knew. The account had been dissolved per the settlement. She was seeing someone new, older, a retired civil engineer, steady by all accounts. I wished her well. Mostly I meant it. About a year after the divorce was final, Merritt Outdoor Living had a booth at the home and garden expo downtown. New portfolio photos on the back panels. 2 of my crew there to talk materials and timelines. It was a strong day. We collected more leads in 4 hours than a slow month would bring in. Near the end of the afternoon, I looked up from a conversation and saw my ex-wife across the exhibition floor. She was staffing a table for her new firm, holding brochures out to an older couple, talking them through something with practiced ease. She looked different, quieter, more careful about how she carried herself. She saw me about 30 seconds later. There was a moment where either of us could have found something else to look at. Neither of us did. She came over when her table went quiet. "Knox," she said. "I heard things were going well." "They are." I nodded toward her display. "New firm working out?" "It's fine. Smaller than I'm used to." A small shrug. "I'm learning to be okay with smaller." I didn't have anything to say to that. "You look good," she said. I think she meant it without any agenda behind it. Just an honest observation. "Take care of yourself," I told her. She nodded once and walked back to her table. I watched her for a moment and felt, not anger, not satisfaction, not grief. Something closer to driving past a house you used to live in. Recognition without any claim left on it. That evening I drove out to the property I'd put an offer on 2 months after the settlement closed. 20 acres on the edge of the valley. A creek running along the east boundary. A long flat stretch behind the cabin, where I kept meaning to design my own outdoor space instead of everybody else's. I'd been saying since spring I'd break ground soon. I stood on the back slope as the sun dropped behind the tree line and mapped it out in my head. The grade of the stone. Where to set the fire pit. How to orient things to capture the view of the water. The creek made a sound like a long, quiet conversation. The sky went from orange to a deep blue. I don't usually let myself stop and look at. I stayed out until the stars came all the way up. There's a specific kind of quiet that follows something that should have broken you, and didn't. It isn't happiness at first, it's more like the absence of a sound you'd grown so used to. You'd stopped hearing it. The mornings feel different. You make coffee, and it's just coffee. No performance to it, no negotiating the air in the room. I built this business with my hands. I always knew that if something fell, I'd know how to raise it back up. What I didn't know was that the same was true of everything else. At 52, starting over wasn't what I expected to be doing, but standing on that slope in the dark, listening to the water, looking at 20 acres of possibility I hadn't let myself want during the years. I was trying to hold together something already gone. I think I finally understood what it means to build on solid ground.